You know how we do when we have funky music in our ear. We get to writing, ain't no fighting, we just in there trying to win. Ooh yeah, la-di-da, we grinding hard. Ooh yeah, we not gonna stop. Yeah, 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 yeah. Too late to turn back now. I got work to do. On a mission, by my business, I'm pushing through.
Hello sports fans, I'm your host Nicholas Austin Holiday here with Between Classic Sports, and we're here to bring you all the updates on college football. We've been missing that action for a while. It's been a few weeks, but we're back. Got a lot of action to talk about. I want to touch on some of the bowl games, and I'm just going to start. I'm going to delve in right now because there's so much going on, so I don't want to keep the people waiting. So first we'll start off with the Popeyes Bahamas Bowl. Popeyes is actually having their bowl in the Bahamas. This will be the first college football bowl game that's held in the Bahamas. Now they have Central Michigan and Western Kentucky playing. Not sure what type of crowd that's going to bring out because I don't know if either one of those schools has a large national fan base, but you can guarantee that some of those people from the Bahamas are going to go to that game because they just want to see American football. Over there, you know, football, or as we call it over here, soccer is really big. So I can assure you that they want to see some American football. So look for it to be a good crowd on hand. I'm not sure who's going to win the game. I think I'm going to go with Western Kentucky. I know they do have a high-flying offense, so I think they can pull off the game, you know, put up enough points on the board. But next we have the Bitcoin Bowl that's right here in our own backyard in St. Pete, which is NC State and UCF playing. Now I expect that to be a really, really good game. UCF has had a really solid team this year, and they've lost some games, but they've also pulled some big upsets. NC State, on the other hand, they surprised some teams earlier in the year, but they took some tough losses at the end of the year. Jacoby Brissett is a really strong quarterback for NC State, so I look for them to really do something. I look for that to be a really big game. Those are two teams that they're up and coming. They're up and coming right now. NC State with their new coach, O'Leary over at UCF is doing great things. They're starting to up recruiting a little bit, and an AAC versus ACC matchup. It's gonna be a good game. You know, they're gonna be tough in the trenches. So I'm interested to see how that game plays out. I'm actually gonna go with UCF to pull off the win in that game, but we'll see how things go. Next we have the Duck Commander Independence Bowl, which is Miami versus South Carolina, and that is in Shreveport, Louisiana. South Carolina and Miami, they both underachieved this year. A lot of people had Miami slated to contend in the ACC. A lot of people had South Carolina slated to contend in the SEC, and neither one of the teams were able to do that this year. They both took some tough losses. So you have Steve Spurrier against Al Golden. I'm not sure how things are going to go, but both teams have really good running backs. South Carolina's Mike Davis and Miami's Duke Johnson are really good running backs, and I think they'll be going probably in the first 2 to 3 rounds of the draft. I say the first 3 rounds of the draft. I'm a big fan of both of theirs. They both run tough. They run hard. We all know Duke Johnson, one of the top running backs in the nation this year. He actually now holds the all-time rushing record at the University of Miami, which is really, really impressive. A lot of fans want him to come back next year. Why? Why come back? You know, he broke his ankle last year. Go to the NFL and get paid. I believe Mike Davis for South Carolina is a senior, so he has to go on anyway. These are two programs. I don't want to say, well, South Carolina's not a storied program, but Miami's a storied program. Miami they've fallen off a lot right now. You know, their recruiting is hurting. A lot of fans are calling for the coach's head. We'll see how things play out. Let's see if they can get back on track. Let's see if Al Golden can rally the troops and really get them ready for this game. I know for either one of these teams, this is not the ideal game for them because both teams had such high expectations at the beginning of the season. But you know what? It's a game. It's a bowl game. You made it to a bowl game because there's plenty of teams that didn't make a bowl game. So go out there, give it your all, and we'll see how things play out in the end for both of those teams. Next, we have the National University Holiday Bowl, which is Nebraska versus USC. Those are 2 more teams that were all over the place this year. A lot of people thought Nebraska at one point had a chance to contend for the Big Ten. A lot of people thought that USC was going to make a meteoric rise in the Pac-12, but that didn't happen for either team this year. As we all know, Nebraska's coach, Bo Pelini, was fired. Bo Pelini has consistently won 9 games, so I'm not sure why Nebraska would fire him. And then they turn around and hire the head coach from Oregon State. That doesn't make any sense at all. If you wanted to get another coach that wins 8 or so games a year, you might as well have kept Bo Pelini. But maybe they saw something in him that they think will translate over to Nebraska when it comes to recruiting and everything else. But I think that firing Bo Pelini was a bad move, especially by who they're replacing him with. I mean, we'll see how things work out in the end. But Bo Pelini is probably going to be a pretty hot name out there on the market for somebody that's looking to pick him up. And if you put Bo Pelini in a place where it's easier to recruit, we all know that Nebraska's not the easiest place to recruit players to. So if you put him in a place where it's easier for him to recruit, I say look out, and we'll see how things play out for him. USC is on their way back up to the top right now. You know, they got a new coach in, they got Sarkisian in, so they have an energetic coach that's going to bring in the recruits. Now that they're off their probation and their scholarship limitations, I really think they're going to build their team back up. Don't forget, you know, you have Oregon right now, you have Stanford in the Pac-12 that are doing some big things, even Arizona State here and there. But remember, USC was the team to beat in the Pac-12 and in the nation, and when they fell off, that's when all these other teams started rising up. Oregon doesn't have a history. You know, everybody loves Oregon, their speed, their uniforms, but Oregon was not the team to beat. It was USC. When USC fell off, all these other teams started rising up. So, you know, look for USC to really do some big things in the next few years. But I think that's a really interesting game. You have the ground and pound game of Nebraska with Amir Abdullah, one of the best running backs in the nation. So I think it'll be a very interesting game. Next, we have the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, which is Texas A&M versus West Virginia. Now, I'm going to go with West Virginia to win this game. Texas A&M, they started the season off strong, and they tanked big time. Texas A&M doesn't field the defense. I'm not sure what Kevin Sumlin is doing right now, but it's been multiple years in a row where Texas A&M hasn't fielded a defense. They tried to get Will Muschamp after Will Muschamp was fired from Florida, but who didn't try to get Will Muschamp? One of the hottest defensive coordinators in college football. By the way, Auburn won that battle. They got Will Muschamp. They're paying him, I believe, $1.7 million per year on top of his buyout from Florida, which is over $6 million. So Muschamp and his family are eating good right now. They don't have to worry about those things. But back to the game, West Virginia, Clint Trickett, he transferred from Florida State. A lot of people weren't sure if he was going to be a starter anywhere else. But Clint Trickett went to West Virginia and made a name for himself. You know, routinely throwing for 300-plus yards. I think Clint Trickett's played himself into the draft somewhere, probably in the later rounds, maybe 4th round and on. But with White at receiver for West Virginia, who's one of the best wide receivers in the nation, you know, this guy is a beast. He's about 6'3", 6'4". He catches everything. So I think this is going to be a really good game, but I think West Virginia plays a lot tougher than Texas A&M does. Texas A&M keeps going back and forth. They don't even have a quarterback. So I look for West Virginia to win this game, and I look for them to put up a lot of points on Texas A&M's defense. Next, we have the Russell Athletic Bowl, which is Oklahoma versus Clemson. Oklahoma was a team coming into the season. A lot of people said Oklahoma was stacked, that Bob Stoops really had his guys ready to go, and that they were going to win the Big 12. You know what Oklahoma did? Oklahoma lost multiple games and did not win the Big 12. Clemson, on the other hand, they had Clemson slated to come into the season and be a really, really strong team. Clemson has the freshman all-star quarterback Deshaun Watson, who Deshaun Watson actually tore his ACL, so he won't be participating in the bowl game. The quarterback that started the year for them, Cole Stout, is horrible. Cole Stout should not be playing quarterback for any team in college football on any level. He looks like the NFL version of Ryan Leaf. So I'm not really sure how they even got into a position where Cole Stout was supposed to be the quarterback. But you know what? Clemson has a top 3 defense in the nation. Their defense is actually number 2. So I look for defense. I look for Clemson's defense to really stifle and shut down Oklahoma's offense. Trevor Knight has been good for Oklahoma at times this year, but he's also been really shaky this year. So I'm gonna go with Clemson in that game. You know, you have the ACC matchup, ACC versus Big 12 matchup, but look for Clemson to come out on top in that game. Next in the Advocare V100 Texas Bowl, we have Arkansas and Texas. If you leave it up to SEC fans, Arkansas is the greatest 5-loss team in the history of college football. But you know what? They're a 5-loss team, so they're not great. So I wish people would stop saying that. Arkansas, you know, they have a solid running game. You know, they have Alex Collins back there. They have the 2-headed monster. And, you know, they can run the ball on some people, but you know what? You're not a great team if you lose that many games. So I wish people would stop trying to hype Arkansas up. Arkansas is a mediocre team. You know, no matter how you want to spin it. They want to say, well, if you put Arkansas in another conference, Arkansas will probably be, well, they're not in another conference, so it doesn't matter. Arkansas is not that good of a team, unfortunately. But you know what? Texas is not that good of a team either. So I'm actually going to go with Arkansas to win this game. I know. I talked so bad about Arkansas, but I'm still going to go with them to win this game because Texas has had to release so many players, and they have so much rebuilding that they have to do that they're just not where they need to be at yet. Next we have the Franklin American Mortgage Music City Bowl, which is Notre Dame versus LSU. Now we all know Notre Dame started the season off really strong. They were ranked in the top 5, and we know LSU came into the season overranked as they lost games and they actually fell out of the rankings. But in this game in particular, I look for LSU to mow Notre Dame over. I like for them to just run the ball down their throats, just over and over, play after play. Because you know what? LSU doesn't have a quarterback. So they have to run the ball. Now, if Notre Dame can stop the run, because Notre Dame is actually getting a little bit healthy. They had some key injuries down the stretch, which caused them to lose plenty of games. But they're starting to get healthy. Now, LSU doesn't have a quarterback. Notre Dame's starting to get healthy. Notre Dame has Everett Golson, Everett Golson's a good quarterback at times. But Everett Golson is a turnover machine at times. Now, depending on which Everett Golson you get will determine the outcome of this game. If Everett Golson is lights out like he's been at times this season, you know what? I think they're really going to contend and they're going to give LSU problems and they have a chance to win. But if Notre Dame can't stop LSU running the ball, there's going to be a lot of trouble for Notre Dame all game long. I'm interested to see how that game plays out. You know, you have Brian Kelly, who is a offensive mastermind versus Les Miles, who is a lot of people joke around and call him crazy, but one thing Les Miles is a good coach, and he knows how to recruit. I'm actually going to pick LSU to come out on top in this game, but you know what? Quarterback play is going to be really important in this game, so we'll see how things play out. Next, we have the Belk Bowl, which is Georgia versus Louisville. Now, that's going to be a really interesting game. Don't forget, Louisville has Gerard Holloman, who won the award for the top defensive back in college football with 14 interceptions, where he tied the single season record for interceptions. Look for him. If he gets one more interception, he now holds the record for the most interceptions in a single season in college football history. Georgia, they've been so up and down this year. This is the same Georgia team that let Florida run wild on them. Their defense hasn't been able to stop teams at times. And Georgia Tech beat Georgia in their rivalry game. You know, don't get me wrong, Georgia Tech has a really, really potent flex bone offense. So you can't just say, oh, well, Georgia should just beat Georgia Tech, because Georgia Tech is a good team. But I actually think that Louisville is going to win this game. When Louisville played Florida State, Louisville had a top-ranked defense, and they fell some spots after the loss. But Louisville's defense is still really, really tough. They have Parker out there at receiver. They have Dyer at running back. So they have some really, really good pieces, and they have some guys that are going to the NFL. Parker for Louisville is going to be a first-rounder. Possibly the second wide receiver taken off the board after Alabama's Amari Cooper. So they have some really, really good players. So we'll see how things play out. But I'm going to go with Louisville to win over Georgia. And I don't want to say it's going to be a blowout, but I think Louisville could possibly win by a couple of scores because Georgia struggles at quarterback. Todd Gurley's out for the season. the big-time running back. I mean, they had Nick Chubb backing him up, and Nick Chubb is a really good running back. Sonny Michel. So they have some good pieces in place, but I still think that Louisville's going to win this game by a couple of touchdowns. Next, we have in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Georgia Dome, we have the Chick-fil-A Bowl, which is Ole Miss versus TCU. Now, that's going to be a really good game. TCU, those guys have to feel cheated after not making the 14 playoff. TCU was ranked number 3, and they blew out Iowa State at the end of the season, and they still fell from number 3 to number 6 and out of the 14 playoff. You know, what else can you ask a team to put up 50-something points on a team they're playing against? And they did just that, and they still fell 3 spots, which is ridiculous. I don't even want to get into the whole playoff committee and how they're picking teams right now, but they're setting a dangerous precedent right now because they feel like they're just putting teams where they want to put them, and it's not looking really good. But TCU is going to come out, and they're going to be upset, and they're going against Ole Miss, who was a contender in the SEC at one point until they lost a couple of games. I look for TCU to actually jump out and beat Ole Miss. Don't forget, Ole Miss, I mean, Bo Wallace is a solid quarterback, but Bo Wallace does not wow me at all. And then, you know, their top receiver, Treadwell, he broke his leg, so he's out for the season. And Boynton for TCU is a dynamic quarterback. So I think it'll be a very good game, but I look for TCU to win that game and to make a statement and show the committee why they think they should have been in the 14 playoff. Next, we have the Vizio Fiesta Bowl, which is Boise State versus Arizona. Now, Arizona had a chance to win the Pac-12, but they got steamrolled in the Pac-12 championship by Oregon, unfortunately. You know, they beat Oregon during the season as 17-point underdogs, but Oregon came back and steamrolled them in the Pac-12 championship. So don't think for a second that Arizona's not going to come out with a chip on their shoulder and play hard. Boise State, you know, they're ranked in the top 25. They struggle ever since they joined the real conference. But I just don't see Boise State winning that game. I think that Arizona's going to win that game and win it pretty easily. But, you know, kudos to Boise State for even being ranked in the top 25 and having, you know, a good season up until this point. Next, we have the Capital One Orange Bowl, which is Mississippi State versus Georgia Tech. Now, that's going to be a really, really good matchup. Don't forget, Mississippi State claim to fame was their defense. They had a really, really tough front seven. And Georgia Tech's claim to fame is their running offense. You know, they run a flex bone offense. Georgia Tech's Justin Thomas is a really, 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 really excellent quarterback within that scheme. He was recruited by a lot of top teams across the nation to play defensive back. So he's a great athlete. He runs that offense. His instincts and his awareness is on point. So I'm really interested to see how that game plays out. Now, can Mississippi State's Dak Prescott, can he get back on track? I know he had a couple of rough games during the season. He had a couple of games where he threw multiple interceptions. But if he can get back on track, they could give Georgia Tech's defense fits. Georgia Tech does not have a really, really strong defense. And as you can see, it was exploited easily by Florida State's offense. Even though Georgia Tech's offense held up with Florida State. So we'll see how things play out. It's going to be strength on strength. Georgia Tech's rushing offense versus Mississippi State's defense. So I'm really interested to see how that game ends up playing out. Next, we have the Outback Bowl, which is Auburn versus Wisconsin. Now, these are two run-heavy teams. You have Auburn with Nick Marshall at quarterback leading the helm. You know, he has dynamic receivers in Sammy Coates and Duke. Then on the other side, you have Wisconsin, and everybody knows who Wisconsin has, Melvin Gordon. Give the ball to Melvin Gordon and watch him work. That is why Melvin Gordon won the top running back in the nation. So this game is going to be really good. Auburn's defense has been really, really shaky this year. So I think Melvin Gordon has a chance to put up a lot of yards on Auburn's defense. But I also think that Auburn's offense has a chance to really shred Wisconsin's defense. So I think this is going to be a high-flying attack. I think this is going to go back and forth. Wisconsin on the ground, Auburn on the ground and through the air. We'll see how things play out, but I actually look for Auburn to win this game in the end because I just don't think Wisconsin is dynamic enough, and I think that with all the pieces that Auburn has in place. And don't forget, Auburn has hired Will Muschamp now. Now, I'm not sure if Will Muschamp will be there to coach the bowl game because it's so close. So I would assume that he won't be there to coach the bowl game. He hasn't had a chance to bring his scheme in. So you don't want to confuse these college players like that. You keep them with the defensive coordinator that's there or the interim coordinator, whoever it is. But in the next few years, look out for Auburn to be very, very scary. With Gus Malzahn running that offense the way he already has and the way he is now, and once Will Muschamp gets his hands on that defense and really molds them, that defense is going to be scary. The SEC West is going to be tough between Auburn and Alabama. You know, Auburn's recruiting is going really well, but they're going to pick up. I don't know if they're going to catch Alabama in recruiting because Nick Saban's Death Star out in Tuscaloosa is just flying right now. It's just mowing through everybody. But look for Auburn to be really, really good in the next few years. But I look for Auburn to win this game against Wisconsin just because they have more pieces in place and they're a more dynamic team. Next, we have the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic, which puts Michigan State versus Baylor. The Big Ten versus the Big 12. Baylor is another team that feels cheated by the 14 playoff. Baylor ended up at number 5, right outside of the 4 teams needed in the playoffs. So Baylor feels like they should have been in. Baylor feels like all season long they should have been ranked ahead of TCU since they won the head-to-head versus TCU. But once again, like I said, nobody was really sure what the committee was doing. So Baylor's going to come out. Baylor's going to play tough, you know. But don't forget, Michigan State had the top-ranked defense, and Michigan State had some falls this year, and Michigan State let Ohio State run through them, unfortunately. But I think this is going to be a really, really interesting game. You have Baylor's high-flying offense versus Michigan State's stout defense. You know, who wins out? Does Michigan State have the speed to contend with Baylor's offensive weapons, their receivers out there running around? I think it's going to be a really, really good game. And I look forward to it, and I'm always a guy that says offense wins games, defense wins championships. So I have to go with the team that has the better defense, which is Michigan State in this one. But I look for it to be a close game because Baylor's going to score points because they just have that type of offense. Next, we have the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl, which is Missouri versus Minnesota. Minnesota surprised some people this year. Minnesota pulled off a few big games. I unfortunately look for Missouri to beat them fairly easily. Missouri, don't get me wrong now, Missouri lost to Indiana during the year, so Missouri, they're definitely not world beaters. And if you saw the SEC championship game, you saw Alabama playing against air. They steamrolled Missouri. They had their way with Missouri. They did whatever they wanted to do. They ran the ball on the ground. They threw the ball to Amari Cooper. They hit the tight end. It was a slaughter. The SEC East sent Missouri to be sacrificed by Alabama. I guarantee Florida watched that game. Well, Florida ran into the buzzsaw, which was Alabama earlier in the season, and they got steamrolled. And I actually think that Georgia, coming out of there, probably had the best chance. But you know what? Georgia didn't make the SEC championship game, and Missouri did because of some close breaks. But Missouri went there, and they were just sacrificed at the altar, unfortunately. But you know, I look for Missouri to rebound back and win this game. I'm not sold on Minnesota. I know Minnesota has a solid team. They have a good coach, but I'm not sold on Minnesota to win this game against Missouri. And it has nothing to do with SEC. It just so happens that I think that Missouri is a better team. I think there's plenty of other teams in other conferences that are better than Minnesota also. So, you know, now we're to the big time games. Now, first we have number 2 versus number 3 in the nation. That is number 2 Oregon versus number 3 Florida State in the Rose Bowl out in Pasadena, California. These are the games that everybody's been waiting for. Who the committee picked for the 4-team playoff. So, how's this game going to play out? Now, we all know Oregon has the Heisman Trophy winner, Marcus Mariota at quarterback. We all know that Florida State has last year's Heisman Trophy winner and Jameis Winston. Marcus Mariota, a great college quarterback. He's dynamic. He's fast. He's a pretty big guy. He's strong. Marcus Mariota can take that ball. He can take a busted play and run it for 60 yards down the field on you. So how can Florida State contain Marcus Mariota and the Oregon offense? Oregon's offense is their claim to fame. That's what they do. With their misdirection, their speed out on the edges, they really try to spread you out and exploit you everywhere they can, whether it's your receivers against your cornerbacks, whether it's against your linebackers. They really try to exploit you. Now, they have a really, really good, young, talented running back in Freeman. So let's see what Freeman can do on Florida State's defense. Now, where football games are won is on the trenches. Offensive line, defensive line. I think that's where Florida State holds the edge. Florida State's offensive line outweighs Oregon's defensive line by maybe about 30 to 40 pounds a person. But Florida State's offensive line has just been, during the Miami game, ever since they made the switch and moved Cam Irving from left tackle to center, and they put the true freshman Roderick Johnson at left tackle, who's 6'7", 330 pounds, they've been absolutely steamrolling teams on the ground. With Dalvin Cook has been putting on a show on the ground on every single team they played since that Miami game. And he had some great games before that against teams like Louisville. But since that Miami game, he shredded Miami's defense. Just recently he shredded Georgia Tech's defense in the ACC championship game. But I look for this game to be a really good game. Don't get me wrong, Florida State's defense, they're not world beaters this year. They're not the great defense they were last year. But I think that Florida State has a lot of good pieces in place. And I think that one of the differences between Pac-12 football and football in the Southeast, maybe, the ACC, SEC, or whatever, is the toughness and physicality on the lines. I think that Florida State holds the edge and physicality on the offensive line and defensive line. I think, Florida State has players like Eddie Goldman on the defensive line, who's slated to be a first-round pick at defensive tackle. They have a Mario Edwards Jr., who's slated to be a first or second-round pick at defensive end. So I think that's where this game will be won and lost. If Florida State can contain Mariota, I think they'll win this game because I don't think that Oregon's defense will be able to stop Florida State and Jameis Winston. I think that Jameis Winston will have his way throwing the ball around the field and running the ball, but Oregon's going to get their points also, and that's where it gets a little sticky. Can Florida State contain Oregon's offense? Because if Florida State allows Oregon to get up on them, Oregon can just keep piling on, as we saw what they did to Arizona in the Pac-12 championship game. Florida State, they've given up some yards. They've had almost all of the games this season have been really, really close games. So how would that fare out? Will they be able to slow down Oregon? Will Oregon be able to slow down Florida State? Will Florida State be able to impose their will in the run game and the pass game? And will Oregon be able to have their way passing the ball all around the field on Florida State? And Florida State's linebackers have been really suspect in coverage this year. So I think this is going to be a really big game. I'm actually going to go with Florida State to pull out the win in this game just because I think that Florida State matches up really, really well with this Oregon team when it comes to speed on the edges and them being able to contain. Now, Mariota, I think he's going to get his. I think Mariota, I don't know if he'll run for 100 yards. I don't think he'll run for that much. But I think Florida State will be able to slow down their running game enough, and they'll really be able to have enough DBs in the game to confuse Mariota. Whether they have 5 DBs and 6 DBs, they're running the nickel or the dime, I really think they'll be able to contain Oregon's offense somewhere, or just at least get some key stops when they need to. And I don't think that Oregon's defense will really be able to do much with Florida State's offense. I think that they're going to have to commit numbers to the box to try to stop Cook from running. And when you try to commit numbers to the box, you have Jameis Winston back there, who is arguably the best quarterback in college football right now, passing the ball around. So I look for it to be a really, really good game. Both teams have to prepare. These 3 weeks off will give these teams a chance to get healthy. They'll be able to implement their scheme, and they'll be able to work in a lot of new wrinkles. Like I said, I look for Florida State to win, but I look for it to be a close game. Because you know why? Oregon's been blowing teams out this year, but that's not Florida State's. That's not their MO. Florida State has not done that this year. Florida State's kept everything close. I guess they like to win in dramatic fashion. They are undefeated, but they've had many dramatic dramatic close wins. So I look for Florida State to pull out another close game against Oregon. And next, we have number 1 versus number 4. Number 1 Alabama versus number 4 Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. Now, this is the other big game right here. This is the other two teams in the college football playoff. What's going to happen? Ohio State's down to their third string quarterback right now. You know, Miller was out earlier in the season with a shoulder injury. J.T. Barrett went down with a broken ankle. So now they're on their third string quarterback, Jones. He's a big guy, 6'5", about 250 pounds. And you see he put on a show in the Big Ten championship game. They rolled Wisconsin. They killed them. I don't remember the exact score, 55-0, 59-0, I believe it was. And they held Melvin Gordon in check. Melvin Gordon only had 84, 85 rushing yards. So Ohio State's shown that they're proficient in stopping the run, which is where Alabama really excels with T.J. Yeldon, and you know they have Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, best wide receiver in the nation. So they can really stretch you out over the top, which Blake Sims will do. Blake Sims will get out there and he'll run around at the quarterback position. This is a quarterback that they were going to move to running back at one point. So he can really get out there and run around and make some plays and make some guys miss. But if Ohio State starts letting Blake Sims throw over the top of them, they're going to be in trouble. If Ohio State can keep that contained and they can really focus on the run, I think they can give Alabama fits. But like I say, Alabama, their claim to fame is the run game, and they have pretty much the best coach in the game right now, Nick Saban, who has his team year in and year out contending for top bowl games or championships. So I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but don't forget, Ohio State has Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer has won national championships. He was the coach of Florida. He's beat Alabama with teams before. So this is not a pushover. I really want to see how the game plan is going to work out between these two coaches, these two mastermind coaches. How's Urban Meyer's spread going to do out of the Big Ten against Alabama's smash mouth style of football? It's going to be a really interesting game. I look for Alabama to pull this game out in the end just because I think they're a stronger team all around than Ohio State, and I think they'll be able to run the ball on them when it comes down to it. But don't count Ohio State out. Ohio State has some real playmakers out there. They have Joey Bosa out there on the defensive line anchoring, so they have some really talented players. So I really think this game is gonna play out very interesting. But I think that Alabama will pull the game out in the end. And last but not least, we have the Birmingham Bowl, which is in Birmingham, Alabama, which is East Carolina versus Florida. East Carolina had a really promising season at one point. They were ranked in the top 25, and they were just really rolling. They were beating up on some teams, just flat out blowing some teams out. They beat up on North Carolina and put up 70-something points on them. So a lot of people thought that East Carolina was legit, but you know what? They had some tough losses. Florida was a team. I don't know if anybody expected too much out of them, but Florida had another bad season, which is why Coach Will Muschamp was fired. But Florida's bringing in a really good coach, I believe, from Colorado State, and Jim McElwain, and he will get Florida back on track. He's really shown how he can build a program up and really bring in the players that he needs. So I fully expect him to get the players that he needs at Florida. And Florida's not a tough sell. Florida's in fertile recruiting ground in Gainesville. They can recruit South Florida, North Florida. They can go into other states. So look for Florida to really build back up in the next few years and contend again in the SEC and in the state. Right now, Florida State's obviously running the state as they beat Florida and Miami this year. But look for Florida to be back up really, really soon, which is scary for Miami because is Miami going to be left as the odd man out as Florida State and Florida just run through the state and run through college football? Well, I can't give Florida too much right now because they're not there yet. Florida State is there. But like I say, I think that Florida will be back there really, really soon with Jim McElwain leading the helm. But I'm not really sure what to think about this game. I know Florida has a really, really tough defense. Muschamp had those guys playing every year. They have one of the best cover corners in the nation and Vernon Hargreaves. So they have Dante Fowler. These guys are going to be first rounders. So I look for Florida to win this game on the back of their defense because their offense is all over the place. I mean, they had Kelvin Taylor at running back. They had Matt Jones. They have Treon Harris at quarterback. Treon's just not really a good quarterback right now. Treon's a really good athlete. He can scramble, but Treon, his accuracy is shaky at times, and he's just not. I don't know if he's the quarterback of the future for them. You know, I wish him luck in whatever he does. I don't know if he's the quarterback of the future in a pro-style offense, which is coming to Gainesville, but we'll see how things play out for him right now. You know, Florida's struggling right now in recruiting. They're ranked in the 90s, but they have a lot of guys that are looking at them to see how they do. And I definitely think Jim will bring some of those guys in this year, but how much can they salvage of this class this year before they just need to focus on next year? But like I said, I look for Florida to pull this game out at the very end in a close game, just because I think the defense will be able to make some big plays at the end of the game. Once again, this is Between Classes Sports. I'm your host, Nicholas Austin Holiday, and I hope to talk to you soon about the results of some of these big-time bowl games.
You know how we do when we have funky music in our ear. We get to writing, ain't no fighting, we just in there trying to win. Ooh yeah, la-di-da, we grinding hard. Ooh yeah, we not gonna stop. Yeah, 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 yeah. Too late to turn back now. I got work to do. On a mission, by my business, I'm pushing through, no slacking. Make it happen, we grinding hard, we grinding hard. You know how we do when we have funky music in our ear. We get to writing, ain't no fighting, we just in there trying to win. Ooh yeah, la-di-da, we grinding hard. Ooh yeah, we not gonna stop. Yeah, 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 yeah. Too late to turn back now. I got work to do. On a mission, by my business, I'm pushing through, no slacking. Make it happen, we grinding hard, we grinding hard. You know how we do when we have funky music in our ear. We get to writing, ain't no fighting, we just in there trying to win. Ooh yeah, la-di-da, we grinding hard. Ooh yeah, we not gonna stop. Yeah, 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 yeah. Too late to turn back now. I got work to do. On a mission, by my business, I'm pushing through,